I stared at my phone screen, the message glowing back at me like a slap to the face. Happy birthday, sis. Dad just gave me your house. I'm thinking of redoing the living room, something boho chic. It'll be fabulous. My heart skipped a beat, then pounded hard in my chest. My house. The home I had worked for, sacrificed for, the one place that was truly mine, was now a gift, handed over like a toy, to my sister Madison. I could see her in my mind, lounging by the pool, wearing one of her designer bikinis, phone in hand, posing for her next Instagram story. She'd probably throw some ridiculous welcome to my new crib party with overpriced champagne and a celebrity DJ, while I'd be here. At this desk. Like always. I was in my office at Parker Lux Hotels, the family business. A glossy, glass-walled space on the 25th floor overlooking downtown Los Angeles. The sun was starting to set, painting the skyline with gold, but I barely noticed. Spread across my desk was a $12 million acquisition deal that needed my signature. This was what I did: built contracts, managed properties, negotiated with investors. I ran this company, even if my father, Richard Parker, still held the title of CEO. But none of that mattered now. My fingers trembled as I gripped the pen, hovering over the contract. I forced myself to breathe, forced the pen to move, signing my name in bold strokes. On the outside, I looked calm, composed, professional. But inside, something was cracking. My house. The one I saved for, month after month, year after year, through endless 12-hour shifts, corporate dinners, and sleepless nights. The house I walked into after my first big promotion, champagne in hand, whispering, "You did it, Emily." The house where I hung my grandmother's portrait in the hallway and promised myself I would never let anyone take this away from me. But now, with a few casual words and a father's signature, it was gone. Given to Madison. Madison, the golden child, the influencer with 500,000 followers who had never worked a day in her life. Her full-time job was posting perfectly edited photos, clutching designer handbags, sipping lattes at rooftop cafes, tagging #blessed and #bossbabe, while I was the one actually running the empire that paid for it all. I closed my eyes for a moment, willing the rage to subside. I thought of the nights I stayed late at the hotel, watching the cleaning staff vacuum the lobby while I reviewed spreadsheets. I thought of the weekends I canceled plans with friends, missing birthdays and road trips because the company needed me. I thought of the morning I broke down in tears in the parking garage, exhausted, clutching a Starbucks cup with trembling hands, knowing I had to push through because failure was not an option. All of it, every sacrifice, meant nothing to them. Because, to my father, I was just the worker bee. And Madison? She was the princess. I glanced back at my phone, her message still there, her emoji-filled words taunting me. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. Not here. Not in this office. They expected me to break. They thought I would fold, like always, sigh, swallow my pride, and accept that this was just the way things were. But they were wrong. I set the pen down slowly, staring out the window at the city below. Cars rushed by, lights flickered on in the skyscrapers, and somewhere down there, people were fighting for their dreams. People like me. I wasn't going to let them take this from me. Not my house. Not my dignity. Not anymore. You think I was going to cry? Beg my father to reconsider? Plead with Madison to show some respect? No. I had a plan. And they would never see it coming. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my position? Would you have let them strip away everything you worked for? Or would you have fought back? Comment 111 if you believe I deserved better. Because trust me, I knew I did. I set my phone down on the polished mahogany desk, but Madison's message still burned in my mind. My house. Given away like a party favor, like I was nothing. I stared out the window at the Los Angeles skyline, but I didn't see the city. I saw the years that led me here. The sacrifices. The exhaustion. The moments when I thought, just for a second, that maybe my family would finally see me, finally appreciate me. But they never did. Let me take you back to where it all started. I was 16 when I first stepped behind the front desk of our family's flagship hotel, the Parker Lux, in Beverly Hills. While my friends were flipping burgers after school, I was learning how to check in high-profile guests, manage reservation systems, and smile through condescending remarks from men twice my age who saw me as nothing more than a pretty receptionist. That first summer, I also carried luggage. Heavy bags from wealthy travelers who barely noticed me. I remember one afternoon, it was over 100 degrees, when a guest demanded I haul 4 oversized Louis Vuitton trunks up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was too slow. Sweat soaked through my uniform, my arms burned, but I smiled. I always smiled. Because that's what my father expected. Emily, this business demands resilience. If you can't handle a little discomfort, maybe you're not cut out for it, he told me that night when I mentioned the incident. So, I pushed harder. While Madison, 2 years younger than me, lounged by the pool with her friends, taking selfies with $10 smoothies, I was memorizing the hotel's accounting software. I learned how to calculate occupancy rates before I even got my driver's license. When I turned 18, I didn't get a car like Madison did, a brand new white Range Rover with a giant red bow on top, parked in our driveway for everyone to see. I got a handshake and a promotion. You've earned this, Dad said. I was proud. For a while, that was enough. But it didn't take long for the resentment to creep in. I watched Madison post photos from Ibiza while I stayed late, processing invoices. I listened to her giggle with her friends about her new Chanel bag while I double-checked vendor contracts. She breezed through life, while I carried the weight of our family's legacy on my back. But I told myself it would all be worth it, someday. That belief was what kept me going in 2020, when the pandemic nearly destroyed us. Our hotels emptied overnight. Cancellations flooded in. Bills piled up. Every morning, I walked into our offices, feeling like I was marching into battle. Staff were crying, begging me not to let them go. Suppliers demanded payments we couldn't make. Guests left furious reviews, because safety measures weren't enough for them. I remember one night, around 11 p.m., a guest screamed at me because their room service order was delayed. I had just gotten off a call where we had to furlough half the housekeeping team. My hand shook as I apologized to the guest, then stepped into the staff break room and cried into my sleeve. But I never let my family see me break. I stayed. I fought. I saved that hotel. And Madison? She spent lockdown on a beach in Tulum, posting pictures in designer bikinis with captions like, "Quarantine, but make it chic." I remember one particularly tone-deaf post, a photo of her holding a margarita, with the caption, "Prayers for small businesses, though." That was my breaking point. I confronted my parents. Do you see what I'm dealing with? I'm holding this company together with duct tape and willpower, while Madison is sipping cocktails on Instagram. Mom sighed, as if I was being dramatic. Sweetheart, Madison is young. She needs to enjoy her life. You've always been the strong one. You understand, right? Strong. That was my curse. Dad was even worse. This business isn't for the weak. If you're not up for it, Emily, you can always step aside. Step aside. After everything I had done. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I smiled. I pushed through. Because that's what I had been trained to do. I stayed late every night. I missed birthdays, holidays. I canceled a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Paris with my best friend because a major investor was threatening to pull out. I remember sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling through her pictures of the Eiffel Tower, while I ate takeout on my couch. The only thing that made it bearable was believing my family would see it. That they would finally say, "Emily, we couldn't have done this without you." But that day never came. Instead, they gave my house, my sanctuary, to Madison. Because, to them, she was the one who mattered. I know what some of you might be thinking. why didn't I just walk away? Why didn't I quit and build my own future, free from their control? Because it's not that simple. This company, it was my life. My identity. I built it with my own hands. Walking away felt like giving up a piece of myself. But now? Now, I was done being the strong one. I was done smiling through the pain. They had taken the last thing I was willing to give. Tell me, have you ever given everything to people who never saw your worth? Have you ever sacrificed your dreams, only to be treated like you were nothing? Comment 222 if you've ever felt that kind of injustice. Because I know I'm not alone. And I promise you, this story is far from over. The day everything truly broke open started like any other. I was at the office, reviewing contracts for our latest hotel project in Miami. The numbers blurred together on the screen, but my mind wasn't on the deal. It was on my house, my home, that, according to my sister, had already been handed over like some prize from a raffle. I had managed to keep my emotions buried beneath a polished exterior, but inside, I was simmering. Every memory of my sacrifices, every time I chose work over my life, every tear I swallowed, was boiling to the surface. Then, my phone buzzed. A notification. TikTok. Madison had posted a new video. I shouldn't have clicked. I knew better. But my curiosity, or maybe my masochism, got the best of me. The video started with Madison standing at my front door. My door. She wore a white crop top, perfectly distressed jeans, and sunglasses perched effortlessly on her head. She smiled into the camera with that influencer-perfect grin, voice sugary sweet. Hey loves. Big news. Daddy just got me this gorgeous new house. $1 million views, a pool, and you know we're gonna make this place some Madison chic. Stay tuned for the remodel, it's gonna be epic. The camera panned across my driveway, my front lawn, the one I'd landscaped myself, and finally, my living room. My grandmother's portrait was still hanging there. She zoomed in on it. Oh, this? Vintage vibes, but we'll probably switch it out for something modern. Maybe neon. She laughed. My blood ran cold. The comments flooded in. OMG, goals. You're so lucky, girl. Manifesting this life. I wanted to scream. That house wasn't luck. It was sweat. It was 10 years of 14-hour days. It was the overtime shifts when we were short-staffed, the business trips that stole my weekends, the relationships I let crumble because the Parker Lux always came first. It was mine. But to Madison, it was content. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. We need to talk, he said when I answered, his voice low and tense. Minutes later, he was in my office, closing the door behind him. He had a stack of papers and a look I had come to recognize. Bad news. I dug into the company accounts like you asked, he started. It's worse than we thought. He laid the documents in front of me. Madison's expenses stretched across the pages like a crime scene. A Tesla, $130,000. Spa retreats, $25,000. Designer clothes, first-class flights, jewelry, hundreds of thousands more. Over 5 years, she had drained more than $2.5 million from the company's funds. All labeled under marketing and brand development. She's been using the company credit card like it's her personal ATM, Ethan said, his voice tight with frustration. This is embezzlement, Emily. Clear as day. I gripped the edge of my desk. My knuckles turned white. Does my father know? Ethan hesitated. I'm almost certain he does. He's been signing off on every single expense. My breath hitched. I had always known my father favored Madison, but this? This was more than favoritism. This was complicity. That evening, I drove straight to my parents' house. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell. My mother answered, her face lighting up like I was there to chat about Sunday brunch. Emily. What a nice surprise. Madison's inside, you should see the new wallpaper sample she picked out. I need to talk to Dad, I cut her off. My voice was colder than I intended, but I didn't care. He was in his study, the place where I had watched him build our family's business empire. The place where I had once admired him. Now, I saw him differently. I placed the financial records on his desk. What is this? He leaned back in his chair, glasses perched on his nose, giving me that practiced look of authority. That's the marketing budget, he said calmly. Marketing? I snapped. A Tesla is marketing? Louis Vuitton is marketing? Spa days and yacht parties, that's our brand strategy now? He exhaled slowly, like he was talking to a child. Madison contributes to the image of our company. Her social media presence gives Parker Lux visibility. You work hard, Emily. You manage the numbers, the operations. Madison promotes the lifestyle. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. You're serious, I whispered. He nodded, as though this was reasonable. Fair. So, I said, my voice shaking now, she plays dress up and burns company money while I sacrifice everything, and that's fair? We each have our roles? That's how this works, he said simply. You know this business requires different strengths. You've always been strong. Madison's strengths are different. Strong. There was that word again. A backhanded compliment. What they really meant was, you'll survive. You always do. So we don't have to worry about you. I stood there, fists clenched, heart racing. I realized then, this would never change. I could bleed for this company. I could hold it together through recessions, pandemics, staffing crises. It wouldn't matter. Because I was the workhorse. Madison was the princess. And they would never see me as anything else. Enough. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out, past my mother, who was fussing over throw pillows. Past Madison, who was filming another video, blowing a kiss to her followers. I drove home, my home. For now. I sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at the front door, wondering how long it would be before they changed the locks. Then, I called Ethan. It's time, I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. Because when you've given everything, your time, your dreams, your loyalty, and they still treat you like nothing? There comes a point when you stop asking for respect. You take it. Have you ever reached that point, where you realized the people closest to you would never see your worth? When you knew it was either stand up for yourself or let them take everything? Comment 333 if you've ever had that moment, the moment you said, enough. Because that was mine. And I was just getting started. The night I left my father's study, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even shake. I was done with that. I had crossed a threshold, the kind you can't come back from. There was no more hope that maybe one day he would see me. No more waiting for my mother to tell me she was proud. No more clinging to the dream that if I worked hard enough, they would finally treat me like I mattered. That night, something shifted inside me. I wasn't their daughter anymore. Not in the way I had been for 26 years. I was a businesswoman. A survivor. A fighter. And I was going to take back what was mine. I called Ethan as soon as I got home. It's time, I said. He didn't need clarification. He was waiting for those words. We met the next morning in his office. It was small, nothing flashy, just 4 walls lined with financial reports and legal books, but it felt like the war room where we would plot our victory. He spread the documents out on his desk. Statements from the company accounts. Expense reports. Credit card bills. Everything Madison had spent. Everything my father had signed off on. The Tesla was just the beginning. Designer bags. Private jets. $3,000 spa days. $12,000 on a single influencer retreat in the Maldives that she wrote off as a brand development workshop. It was theft, masked as luxury. But what made my stomach twist was finding my mother's name on those records too. She had been using company money for personal expenses for years, high-end interior decorators, art collections, even my parents' country club membership. They were all in on it. All while I worked late nights, missed holidays, and poured every ounce of my energy into keeping this company alive. I gripped the edge of Ethan's desk. "Burn it all down," I whispered. He shook his head. "No. We don't burn it. We take it." That's when he showed me something I never expected. The ownership structure of Parker Lux Hotels. Years ago, my father had transferred the majority of his shares to me, 52%. It was a tax loophole he used when I was still a teenager. He probably thought I'd never notice. Thought he would always be in control. But now, those shares were my weapon. I was the majority shareholder. I had the power. I sat back in my chair, letting that realization wash over me. All those years I felt powerless. All those times I thought I was just another employee. I wasn't. I had been holding the keys to this kingdom all along. They thought they could take my house. Take my dignity. But they had no idea what was coming. Ethan and I spent the next few weeks building our case. Quietly. Carefully. I hired a lawyer, one my family didn't know. A woman named Lisa Torres, sharp as hell and ruthless in the best way. She drafted documents to block any transfers of company assets without my signature. My house was untouchable now. We filed for a full audit of company spending, quietly, under the radar. No alarms. Not yet. Every day, I went to work like nothing had changed. I smiled at my father in meetings. I complimented Madison's new designer shoes. I listened as my mother talked about renovating their vacation home in Palm Springs. I played my role perfectly. But every night, I went home and prepared for war. There were moments when the anger nearly swallowed me. When I looked across the dinner table at my father, knowing he had signed away my house like it was nothing. When I watched Madison film another TikTok in my living room, talking about how blessed she was. But I swallowed it down. Because this wasn't about anger anymore. This was about winning. I started paying closer attention to their patterns, things I had ignored for years. I noticed how my father's voice would lower when he took certain phone calls. How my mother would slide receipts into her purse before anyone noticed. How Madison's brand collaborations were often just an excuse for expensive vacations. I knew their weaknesses. I knew their habits. And I was using all of it against them. One night, Ethan and I were reviewing Madison's latest expenses. He handed me a receipt for a $15,000 Chanel shopping spree labeled brand research. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "Do you think she even knows what a budget is?" I asked. "No," Ethan said. "But she's about to learn." There was one moment that nearly broke me. I was at my parents' house for dinner. My mother poured wine while my father talked about expanding the brand to Vegas. Madison scrolled through her phone, barely listening. And then, casually, like it was nothing, my father said, "Oh, by the way, we're finalizing the transfer for the house next week. Should be wrapped up soon." "My house." I smiled. "That's great," I said. "I hope everything goes smoothly." But inside, I was screaming. They still thought I was weak. They still thought I was the obedient daughter who would take whatever scraps they threw at me. Let them think that. Because the moment was coming. The moment when they would realize I wasn't their pawn. I was the queen. Have you ever had to pretend everything was fine while you were planning your comeback? Have you ever smiled at someone who betrayed you, because you knew your revenge was coming? Comment 444 if you know that feeling. Because I knew it well. And soon, they would too. My 26th birthday party was nothing short of extravagant. My mother had ensured it would be. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom of the Parker Lux's flagship hotel, the very first property my father built from the ground up. Servers in black ties circled with silver trays of champagne, while laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the room. Family members I hadn't seen in years mingled with business partners and board members. Everyone was there to celebrate me. Or at least, that's what they thought. I had been preparing for this night for weeks. Every detail was calculated, down to the gold-rimmed place cards and the seating chart that ensured the right people would witness what was about to unfold. The people who mattered. The people who held power within our company. Madison arrived late, of course, making an entrance as though the night belonged to her. She wore a designer dress, undoubtedly charged to the company card, and greeted the room with her signature smile, the same one she plastered on every Instagram post. My father stood near the bar, sipping whiskey, laughing with one of our longtime investors. My mother fussed over the dessert table, commenting on the macaron tower like it was a centerpiece at a royal wedding. I played my role perfectly. Smiled when I was supposed to. Accepted compliments on my success and dedication. But beneath the surface, I was steadying my breath, keeping my heartbeat slow. I knew what was coming. And when it happened, I needed to be ready. The toast began just before dessert. My father raised his glass to honor me, his brilliant, hard-working daughter who keeps this company moving forward. I smiled, but the words felt hollow. And then, Madison took her turn. She clinked her crystal flute, probably worth more than a month's salary for some of our employees, and grinned at the crowd. I have a special announcement, she chirped, her voice sweet and rehearsed. Daddy has given me the most incredible gift, Emily's house. A collective murmur swept through the room. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then louder. My mother beamed with pride. My father avoided my gaze. Madison stood there, glowing, soaking in the attention. I felt the heat rise in my chest. The injustice of it all. The years I spent holding this family together, sacrificing everything, reduced to this moment. My house, my sanctuary, handed to my sister like a party favor. But I smiled. I stood up slowly, holding my own glass. Since we're making announcements, I said, my voice cutting through the noise, I have one of my own. The room quieted. Eyes turned to me. I pulled a folder from my clutch and laid it on the table. My hands were steady. As of this morning, I have officially assumed the role of CEO of Parker Lux Hotels, I said, my tone firm but composed. As majority shareholder, holding 52% of the company, I've made several executive decisions. The applause halted. The tension snapped into place like a tightrope. My father straightened in his chair. Madison's smile wavered. I continued. Effective immediately, all personal expenses will require board approval, not just the signature of the company president. Madison blinked, confused. I have also initiated a full audit of the company's financial records for the past 5 years, focusing particularly on marketing expenses and brand partnerships. My gaze locked onto Madison's. Her face paled. You can't be serious, she muttered. I ignored her. This includes all expenditures related to luxury goods, personal travel, and influencer collaborations. My father leaned forward, his voice low but tense. Emily, this isn't the time or the place. Oh, isn't it? I asked. Didn't you just use my birthday to announce you were giving away my house? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged glances. Board members began shifting in their seats. From across the room, Ethan stood. He began distributing folders to the board members. Inside, evidence. Every dollar Madison had spent. Every signature my father had provided. Every fraudulent invoice disguised as brand development. The documents you're holding outline misappropriation of over $2.5 million in company funds, I announced. Lavish vacations labeled as business trips. Designer shopping sprees, categorized as research expenses. A Tesla purchased under the marketing budget. Madison shot to her feet. Dad approved all of that. I represent the brand. I let out a short, humorless laugh. The brand? I said, pressing a button on the nearby screen. Madison's Instagram feed appeared for everyone to see, photos of her in bikinis, clinking glasses at pool parties, posing with Gucci bags. So this is our corporate image now? Bottle service and designer heels? My mother's face flushed red. She stood, her voice shaking. How dare you humiliate your sister like this? We are family. I turned to her, my voice calm but sharp. Family loyalty? I asked. Where was that when you took my house? The room was silent. Even my father, who had commanded every boardroom he'd ever entered, looked deflated. He tried to regain control, but his voice faltered. This is a private matter. Non-family members should. Ethan stepped in, his voice firm. I'm afraid it's not. This involves corporate fraud. The board has every right to be here. Chaos erupted. Madison was crying, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. My mother was shouting about betrayal. My father was trying to salvage his legacy, leaning over to whisper to board members, but they were too busy flipping through documents. I let them all unravel. When the noise subsided, I stood tall. There's more. I handed over another set of documents. As CEO and majority shareholder, I filed an injunction preventing any company property transfers without full board approval. That includes my house. My father's jaw tightened. You can't do this. Actually, I said, I can. I looked around the room, at people who had seen me as the quiet workhorse, the background figure behind my father's empire. Not anymore. I made my final declaration. Effective immediately, all personal expense accounts are frozen. An external audit will oversee all financial transactions moving forward. And our executive leadership team will undergo a restructuring to align with the company's best interests. A pause. Then, one by one, board members nodded. Hands raised in agreement. My father slumped in his chair. Madison was shaking with rage. My mother looked as though she might faint. I raised my glass. To accountability, I said. I took a sip of champagne, letting the bubbles linger on my tongue. It tasted like victory. Have you ever had that moment, the one where you finally take back what's yours? When you prove to everyone who doubted you that you were stronger than they ever realized? Comment 555 if you think this was the ending they deserved. Because I do. And I'd do it all over again. In the weeks that followed my birthday, the dust began to settle, but nothing was ever the same. The empire my father built, the one I had spent my entire life holding together, was no longer the family playground. It was a business. A professional, tightly run, and finally, respected operation. And for the first time, I was at the helm, not just in title, but in reality. The aftermath of that night had been brutal. My father sulked through the following board meetings, stripped of his unchecked power. My mother's cold glare softened only slightly when we saw each other, though her words remained clipped. Madison, she was a storm. She avoided me for days, then burst into my office, demanding to know what she was supposed to do now. What am I supposed to be? A nobody, she had snapped, tears threatening to ruin her $200 mascara. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I saw not the influencer, not the spoiled golden child, but my little sister, scared, lost, and unsure of her place in the world. There's an entry-level position in the marketing department, I said calmly. Starting salary. Just like everyone else. You'll learn the business from the ground up, if you're willing. Her mouth fell open, ready to fight. But then, something shifted. She knew. She had run out of easy paths. I hate you, she whispered. No, I said, with more kindness than I expected from myself. You hate that I made you grow up. She took the job. Begrudgingly at first. She treated it like a punishment, complaining about the hours, the work, the lack of glamour. but slowly, she started showing up on time. She listened. She asked questions. She stayed late once, just once, and I saw it. That flicker of pride when she completed her first campaign report on her own. I never said anything. But I noticed. And I think she knew I did. My parents adjusted in their own way. My father fought the changes the hardest. He hated losing control, hated seeing his eldest daughter outvote him in the same boardroom where he had once commanded every decision. But he also saw the results. Revenue climbed within the first quarter under my leadership. The reckless spending was cut off. We implemented transparency policies, brought in external auditors, and shifted our marketing approach from vanity to value. We weren't selling an image anymore, we were selling an experience. And customers responded. Our Los Angeles flagship was fully booked for the summer. Our Miami expansion was moving faster than projected. Even our smaller properties, the ones Dad had nearly written off, were thriving with the new management team I brought in. One evening, months after everything unfolded, my father knocked on my office door. He didn't do that. He never knocked. "Got a minute?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. He sat down, eyes scanning the room, the same office he had sat in 1,000 times before, but now it was mine. "I built this company from nothing," he started. I braced myself, expecting the same lecture I had heard for years. "But you," he continued, "you turned it into something better. Something that will last." I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until that moment. "I should have seen it sooner," he admitted. "You didn't just work hard, you built this place as much as I did. Maybe more." It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a movie-perfect redemption arc. But it was enough. My mother softened with time, too. It wasn't immediate. At first, she resented me for shaking the family tree so hard. But then, she saw Madison working, really working, for the first time in her life. And when Madison proudly showed her the results of her first solo marketing project, I saw my mother's eyes shine with something I hadn't seen before: pride, not for the girl who looked good in pictures, but for the woman who had accomplished something real. One night, she stayed behind after a family dinner. Just the two of us in the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of wine and, without looking at me, said, maybe we were too soft on her. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. And I took it. As for me, my life changed in ways I hadn't expected. The company was thriving, but what surprised me most was what happened outside of work. Ethan, my partner through this entire storm, became more than just my confidant. The long nights spent poring over financial statements turned into dinners that lasted hours after the work was done. The phone calls discussing legal strategies shifted into late-night conversations about our childhoods, our dreams, and the futures we never thought we could have. One evening, after a long day finalizing the Miami property deal, he asked me to dinner. Not in the we need to talk business way, but in the I want to know you beyond all of this way. We've been together ever since. We got married last year. It was small, intimate, nothing like the grand Parker family events. Just the people who mattered. He still works alongside me, but our relationship is more than work. He is my anchor. My equal. The first person who saw my worth before I ever claimed it for myself. Together, we've grown the Parker Lux empire into something my father could never have imagined, something built on respect, integrity, and vision. Not vanity. Madison still works in marketing. She's good at it now. Damn good. She's earned her place. She's not just my sister, she's my employee. And she's finally proud of that. My parents? They've stepped back. They spend more time at their Palm Springs house. My father checks in occasionally, but it's no longer out of distrust, it's curiosity. He respects me now. And my house? It's still mine. The same house they tried to take from me. But it feels different now. It's no longer just a symbol of what I fought for, it's a reminder of what I built, and what I refused to lose. People often ask me if I regret how it all played out. If I regret standing up to my family, exposing their flaws, forcing them to face their mistakes. The answer is no. Because loving your family doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. It doesn't mean sacrificing your worth to keep the peace. Sometimes, love means holding them accountable. It means forcing them to be better. And sometimes, it means choosing yourself, even when it breaks your heart. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your future? Have you ever had to fight for what you deserved, even when it meant standing alone? Comment 666 if you believe that strong women will always rise, because I am living proof that we do. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Looking back now, I realize that moment, the night I stood up at my own birthday party and reclaimed everything they tried to take from me, wasn't just about saving my house or fixing the company. It was about saving myself. For years, I thought loyalty meant silence. That being the good daughter meant sacrificing my happiness, my dreams, and my dignity to hold my family together. But I've learned that real strength, the kind that lasts, comes from knowing when to say, enough. Families can be complicated. We love them, but they are also the ones who can hurt us the most. Sometimes, they don't even realize the damage they're doing. Sometimes, they do, and they expect us to just accept it because we're bound by blood. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have to. Loving your family doesn't mean letting them control you. It doesn't mean letting them take everything you've worked for. And it certainly doesn't mean losing yourself just to make them happy. What I did that night was hard. It was painful. But it was necessary. Because sometimes, you have to shake the family tree so the rotten apples fall, and the strong ones finally have room to grow. That's exactly what happened. When I stopped enabling their behavior, they had to face the consequences of their actions. My sister found her purpose. My father remembered what it meant to build something with integrity. My mother saw her daughters, both of us, as more than just roles to fill. And me? I stepped into the role I was always meant to have, not because it was handed to me, but because I earned it. I know I'm not alone. I know so many of you watching this have been in a similar place, caught between loyalty and self-respect, torn between keeping the peace and standing up for what's right. So now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to your family? Have you ever had to fight for what was yours, even when it meant risking everything? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters. You deserve to be heard. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think of your own struggles, your own victories, I ask you to do one more thing. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel for more stories of strength, justice, and redemption. Because we all deserve to rise. And sometimes, it starts with shaking the tree.